Today's episode is brought to you by AOS Kitchens, the South's leading outdoor kitchen design and installation specialists.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Meet and Greet Barbecue podcast. Today we are with the barbecuing and baking legend Sue Stoneman to talk about all things baking. Not only does she have a collection of barbecues to rival Owen's, but she uses it for baking as well as barbecue. We talk about things like brownies, cakes, Pavlovas. If you follow Sue's advice, there's not much that you can't do on a barbecue. So without much further ado, here's Sue.
Okay. Hi, Sue. Welcome to the Meet and Greet Barbecue podcast. Lovely to have you with us. How are you doing today?
I'm really well, thank you. Haven't fired up today, but, always wanting to get outside and fire one of my barbecues up.
Are you twitching because you haven't managed to fire it up today? It's almost like withdrawal symptoms.
Not as bad as Dan is, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I was saying to Sue, it's been 8 days since I've lit the barbecue, and
8 days.
I like even talking about it now, my skin's crawling, and I'm feeling a little bit shaky. Sometimes things get in the way. But I bought 4 kilos of chicken breasts the other day, and I was like, I want to do like as many different chicken cooks as I could. Do you think they've left my freezer? No. Not at all. That's part of the fun, isn't it? Once you decide you can do it, I'm going to go absolutely mad on those chicken breasts for different things and ideas. But for anyone who doesn't know Sue, do you want to introduce yourself and say exactly who you are and what you do?
Okay, I'm more of a home cook, but I've sort of fallen into outdoor cooking on my barbecues, and since having my first barbecue, which was the Kamado Joe, I've taught myself how to sort of bake in it as well. So I've learned to use it like an outdoor oven. So for me, I want to show people that you can actually cook anything outside on a barbecue that's got a lid. And then I've also learned to cook bread and cakes, and a Pavlova even is possible, and an apple pie. And that's what I do.
And that's exactly why we wanted to get you on the podcast. Obviously, we've been following you for a while. We've seen you at Sizzle Fest. We've seen some of the amazing bakes that you've done on your range of Kamados, I believe. So we just obviously wanted to talk to you and spend this time just to talk about all things baking, which is a first for us on the podcast. Obviously, you would traditionally talk about your briskets or whatever, but I think to have an episode dedicated to bakery is actually really, really exciting for us.
Great.
So what got you into baking first and foremost before we get into barbecue?
I just love cooking, and I used to work at a primary school, and we had a farm, some raised beds and a polytunnel. And I used to cook with the children, and we sold, produce, and we cooked with what we grew and sold that. And with what money we raised, we bought a chicken coop and some chickens. So we always had eggs. So we baked a lot, and I always baked a lot at home anyway. And then just thought, I think you can bake in a barbecue. And when I had a bit of pork shoulder cooking on sort of one side of the grills, I thought, hey, I'm going to stick a loaf of bread on the other side and see what happens. And the very first loaf of bread I baked, it got a burnt bottom. Even though it was indirect cooking, the temperature was about 180 degrees centigrade, and obviously I was still getting to learn that the dome temperature is actually cooler than your grill temperature, because the heat's coming up from underneath. So you're in the Kamado Joe, your dome thermometer reads lower than the temperature on your grills. And because I thought, so I think raise the temperature, because when you would cook bread in a domestic oven, you want it sort of 180, 200 degrees C.
Yeah.
So I think I raised the temperature a bit and put the bread in, and it had a burnt bottom. So then my best baking tip I can give you is to put an upturned baking tin on top of your grill, and then whatever you're baking, be it an apple pie or your local bread or your cake. It just raises your tray that you're baking in a little bit higher up from the grill and deflects the heat a little bit more, so you don't get a burnt bottom.
Straight away with the tips. I love it, because I've spoken a few times on this podcast that I keep meaning to do much more baking on there, because it's something that's different, that's exciting. And I mean, I've done pizzas on there. You can't call that baking at all, really.
Well, obviously a higher temperature.
Yeah. But because you have the pizza stone with it, and I was reading about different ideas. I know I'd read about putting a deflector in, then the pizza stone, then anything on top to kind of give yourself that double barrier. But it's good to hear that if people don't have that equipment, you can use other items to just kind of raise you up in the dome.
Yeah.
Is there a kind of depth that you would advise? Is it like a bread tin?
It's about 2 centimeters, 2.5 centimeters. You have to be careful that you don't raise it up too high, especially if it's in the junior, because when you close the lid, and a mistake I did make myself, raised it up a bit too high, and I think I was cooking some chocolate brownies. I was demoing actually at an event, and the thermometer from the junior lid actually went in my chocolate brownies. So of course it was measuring the temperature of the inside of the brownies, and I kept looking at it thinking, why isn't the temperature, why hasn't the temperature risen? So of course opened up the top vent, opened the bottom vent, and that temperature still stuck at, I don't know, 100. And then after 30 minutes I thought it must be cooked by now, or what's going on, and of course lifted the lid and thought, oh, it doesn't smell good. So the top looked okay, so I sort of it was an event for the chef's forum or something, and so I quickly took it away into the kitchen and scraped the bottom bit off and cut it up and went back out and dished it round.
Well, actually, you've already mentioned brownies, so I plan to cook some brownies on the barbecue for the first time this weekend. I've got some friends coming up.
Right.
What's your top tips for? I really consider myself a novice baker, because I like to just, I don't know, chuck ingredients in and just get to the flavour I want. Whereas I think baking, you have to be quite precise.
I have to weigh everything out, even myself. I'm not like James Martin, who just throws it in the bowl. Have you made brownies at all ever in a domestic oven?
Never.
No. So have you got a recipe?
Yes.
Would you like a recipe?
Yeah, I'm using a chili chocolate brownie recipe from Marcus Bowden.
Okay, so that should work. So yes, so follow that recipe and you should be fine.
Great.
What barbecue have you got? What are you going to cook it in?
Funny enough, I was talking to Dan about this today. I was thinking the Traeger. However, I think I want a bit more of a charcoaly, smoky flavour. So I'm thinking maybe the Weber kettle or the Broil King keg. Okay.
Now I've cooked an apple pie in a Weber, so and I had the charcoal over one side, well, in a little corner of it, and then put your brownies over the opposite side, and then you might want to turn it around halfway through cooking, just to even up the cooking in the brownies.
And again, would you recommend that kind of lift off the grill?
I don't think I did, because the heat isn't going to be underneath; it's going to be at the side.
Okay.
So I don't think you'll need it in that.
Great. I'm really looking forward to it. I'll tell you how good or bad they turn out.
So, Sue, you do a lot of baking. What was your total kind of barbecue setup that you have at home?
Okay, so I started off with my Kamado Joe Classic. And then I think my next one was a Suros, a T1. And then I used to do a bit of cold smoking. I did that in the Classic, and I didn't like emptying it with charcoal every time I did some cold smoking, so I bought the Suros smoker, the S1, which is a great little smoker for your home use. And then I got Kamado Joe Jr., just so I can take it on holiday and down to the beach, all 30 kilos of it. What else have I got? I've got a Caddy Fire Pit, which I use, to be honest, more as a fire pit, but it is fun to cook on, but it's a different kind of cooking. It needs babysitting, and everything takes longer to cook on it, and you must be there watching it and lighting the fire and stoking the fire. So that's a bit more challenging but fun.
Yeah.
It does look very exciting though, using that, because I mean, I was looking on your Instagram and you did that chicken that was raised above, and that looked absolutely phenomenal. We're just inviting people over to watch it cook. Like, I wish I'd been
sitting there with a nice chilled glass of Sauvignon Blanc watching it cook. But it's the first time I cooked anything like that, and I was sort of popping in and out the house, and it was a sunny day, but I didn't think I could spend all day outside watching that chicken cook. But for a summer cook, that would be nice if you had friends round and watch it cook. That would be good. But it took about 3.5 hours, I think, to cook a chicken.
That's what I was going to ask. What was the learning process like, kind of running through that, and what were you expecting to happen compared to what actually happened?
Well, because the heat was coming all from underneath, the top remained cold.
Right.
So, but that little cage I had meant you could actually turn it, flip it upside down and around. But then, of course, every time you turned the hot side from the bottom to the top, that cooled down. So I did have my meter in it to help me, just to make sure the inside was cooked, which was a helpful guide. And I still use my thermopen as well, because it cooled down really quickly. And then if you had charcoal directly underneath, the juices drip down, and if you've got a flare up, it was, you know how flames discolor food rather than so I then like made a little well so that if it did drip, I didn't get the flare ups. But if you're out there all the time, you can see that, and you can, you know, maybe spray the coals a bit more, or, you know, spray the chicken. But yeah, it was a learning process, but the chicken was super juicy and really tasty.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And then I've got a few other barbecues. I've got a PK original, which I won. I've got a Gosney Rock box, and I've got an Alfresco Chef Ember pizza oven.
Wow, you've got a collection, so.
I've got a few in the shed, which I don't think have come out of the box, that we used to have for like camping holidays. But that's about it, I think.
So, but back onto baking, you have all of those different barbecues, and I know you said you kind of bake across the lot of them. Do you have a go-to you tend to go to more than others?
It'll be my Kamado Joe, because it's just rock solid, even temperature. That'll be the one I go to every time.
And what's your kind of favourite cook to do on there, baking-wise?
Baking focaccia and chocolate brownies.
It's hard to kind of argue with those things. So when it comes to bread, and you do all different types of bread, was it very much kind of like a learning curve when you first started? And also you talked about kind of the dome and the temperature differences.
Yeah.
Is there a way of finding that out if you're starting to learn, or is there a rough guide?
Yeah, it's I tend to, if you were following a recipe that you were going to cook in your domestic oven, I would probably cook it 20 degrees lower, but cook it for longer.
Right.
And it doesn't colour so much on the top because of that. So maybe near the end of cooking, you just raise the temperature a little bit. But sometimes it does colour nicely. It doesn't always. It's not always the same, but it won't look like, it won't be as colourful, if you know what I mean. It won't be as golden, but you know, it doesn't matter. I do sometimes turn the bread upside down just to give it a bit more colour. but you can't always do that with the cake.
Like a flan or something, and it just all like falls out.
Yeah.
And do you find actually, just in what you were saying there about having to cook it slightly under temperature and for longer, and perhaps the coloration, do you find then it's quite difficult to gain consistency then with your cook? So that if you did 2 apple pies, for example, they may look on the surface completely different.
They should be okay.
Yeah.
Both in this barbecue at the same time. Yeah, they should cook evenly, I think.
I mean, that's the joy of barbecue, right? It does feel different every time, and there's a bit more skill in doing that. I know, even looking away from kind of baking, it's all dependent on kind of understanding temperature, using thermometers, and rather than cooking to time, cooking to temps and checking things regularly. But I'd always be afraid if you were baking, if you're opening it too often and kind of losing that regular temperature and it affecting the rise.
It's quite forgiving actually, because I thought that, but as long as you lift the lid slowly, it's been okay. I haven't had any failures apart from a burnt chocolate brownies, but that wasn't because I opened the lid.
And is there anything in particular that is a lot more difficult baking wise to do on a barbecue, and a bit more of a challenge and flair to get away with?
I wouldn't call it a challenge, but the Pavlova is a stunner of a dish to cook. Actually, you can make it look quite pretty, and for me, I think it's a very easy dessert to cook on a barbecue.
Do you ever use wood? Actually like flavouring with like obviously you'd smoke your meats and that type of thing. Do you ever use the woods to kind of infuse desserts?
Not a lot. I think if you've got good quality charcoal, I used to tend to just like that flavour. So that doesn't actually impart a lot in cakes, because that's what some people ask me. Did my brownies taste of smoke? But they didn't really. But I missed out actually barbecue. I've got a kettle joe as well. And because that's got the slow roller, so that is ideal for smoking. And so I have started actually using a bit of cherry if I cook some duck breasts or some salmon. Or I think I did a goose breast recently with a bit of cherry. So at the minute I'm liking the cherry wood. So
it gives such a lovely colour, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. So I'm just beginning to sort of like smoked foods, but I know I only like a little bit, and I know that you only put on like 1 chunk.
And with the baking that you're doing on the barbecues, are they primarily sweet bakes, or are you actually doing a fair amount of savoury as well?
A bit of both, really. Bread, focaccia, brioche buns, sausage rolls turn out really well, and a great way of using up, your brisket or your pulled pork, or just, using your favourite sausages and taking the sausage meat out of the skins, using them differently. You name it, I'll try and cook in it.
Great attitude. And you mentioned...
all I was going to say was I was looking back on your Instagram and I saw the Burns Night cook that you did, or the tribute to, and the haggis sausage rolls and things. They just looked fantastic.
Yeah, well, haggis is quite dry in itself, and so if you mix it with sausage meat, it actually works quite well, and again adds another flavour.
You mentioned right at the beginning when we first started talking around, I think you were doing an event I can't remember. Yeah, you were saying that you were doing some events, and obviously again we saw you do some demonstrations at Sizzle Fest last year. Is that now? Is that kind of? Do you do quite a lot of that? Do you do demonstrations and cook
I haven't since lockdown. I haven't, but I've just started doing a few courses at Marcus's barbecue school, and he said we met at Sizzle Fest, and I've got a class coming up at the end of this month. I'm doing a sort of a baking class in Southampton, which I'm really looking forward to.
Great. And is that kind of the hope for you for 2022 to get on and do more kind of live demonstrations and show people how to bake on the barbecue?
I'll do a few, but I've obviously got to juggle my own work with what I do. So we'll just see how it goes, really.
And am I right in saying that you've also, I might have got this wrong, so apologies if I have. Haven't you also contributed to the barbecue mag?
I have, since quite early on when Marcus, it was all online.
Yeah.
And he messaged me and said, would I like to, do a recipe or two? So I have, and now it's gone into a printed version. So I actually have just sent off, and I always try and do a savoury and a dessert in there because not many people do desserts. So I won't do what I've cooked, but I've cooked 2 dishes for the spring issue, which I think comes out beginning of March. So
that must be a lot of fun to do.
It is, because it has to, it's nice to do a seasonal recipe, and I always try and do something that I haven't done before. And it normally involves wine.
The source of inspiration.
Yeah, so they both involve red wine this month, funnily enough. The dessert and the main course.
And when you've obviously said that, you're contributing, you're giving, recipes over sweet and savoury, where do you normally find inspiration for those recipes?
They just pop up, or the time of year I will look to see what's out. And it was rhubarb is normally available this time, but I'm sure I did rhubarb last year, so I thought I can't do rhubarb again. Yeah, I do get a couple of food magazines, and I might get some inspiration from a recipe I've seen in there, but obviously then I'll adapt it to suit the barbecue and change a few ingredients and try it out to see if it works first, and then I'll probably cook it again. And then, because you've got to take pictures and that, which takes a bit of time, but it's actually quite fun. And it's best to do it in the daylight rather than at night, because the light, although I've got lights outside, you get shadows and that. So, and then I've got my Hessian cloth I might use, or a few little props. But and then
you'll have a dedicated studio soon.
And you come back inside and your kitchen's like a bomb site, because you've got various plates and bits and pieces out. But it's good fun.
If you've been looking or thinking about an outdoor kitchen, then look no further than AOS Outdoor Kitchens.
They are the South's leading outdoor kitchen design and installation specialists.
Their extensive showroom is based just outside Bournemouth on the Dorset-Hampshire border, and as well as numerous in-store displays, also features a live outdoor kitchen where they cook every week on Kamado grills, pizza ovens, and all filmed and shown on YouTube.
They offer a wealth of knowledge on how to transform your patio into the most incredible outdoor dining area, with styles and options to suit every budget, and you can guarantee they will be able to create something perfectly suited to you and your home.
They stock and supply everything that you're going to need for outdoor cooking, including barbecues, Kamado ovens, pizza ovens, outdoor fridges, and every accessory that you would need to become the ultimate outdoor chef.
So if you want to make yourself the envy of your friends and neighbours, get in touch with them today to arrange a consultation and take the first step in transforming your back garden into the most incredible entertainment space.
Visit aoskitchens.co.uk.
You said that the whole point of kind of the barbecue, or when you originally go into it, was to prove that you can cook anything and everything kind of on a barbecue. Do you see that as a challenge? And is there anything in your sights at the moment that maybe you haven't gone near, or you think would transfer particularly well to barbecue and even improve it compared to in a conventional oven?
I keep thinking about trying a creme brulee and working out how I can get the top crispy, and I think I just have to use a blowtorch on it.
The blowtorch, or what about something like
A lip lighter.
or like the gosney? Could you quickly throw it in a gosney or something if you've got like the heat emanating from the top?
So have two barbecues going at the same time. That's a good idea, actually.
What about when you cook steak and you put butter on, and then you drop a hot coal on the butter?
Yeah.
Would that work? Maybe. I suppose it needs to be more of a flame, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. It might sink in. The charcoal might sink in.
That's true. That's true.
Literally a char brulee.
But that's the one dessert I keep thinking I must try. But by lighting the gosney, that should be perfect.
Do you have something that, I mean, you talked about doing bread a lot, but like a signature for yourself? Like for me, I suppose the most impressive thing that I've done kind of baking wise, I suppose, on a barbecue is I'm very proud of my Yorkshire puddings. I've got them nailed now and get them huge rise. And I prefer the extra flavour you get from a barbecue. But do you have something that feels more like a signature for yourself that you think you're known for?
Signature, nice apple cake, a nice apple cake with cider. It looks pretty, and it's quite easy, apples and a sponge mixture. It's nothing too difficult, and even I've not mastered my Yorkshire puddings very well. They tend to be a bit brown on the bottom, not burnt, but brown.
It's again, it's very similar to what you were saying about the kind of raising it up, so there's not as much stress.
High temperature for the batter to rise.
You also need a lot of space above for them to rise into, because I've made that mistake before as well by raising them up, cranking the temperature right the way up. Again, with a Kamado, you can get very, very high temperatures, so it's easier to kind of play with that while also still using deflectors. But I mean, my trick is whisk the eggs and milk together first and get them mega frothy before you add the flour. I find I get a hell of a lot more rise doing it that way than mixing it all together and whipping up first.
Yeah, I think that the batter is the key. You get yourself a good batter, which is going to help with your rise and your bake.
I want Owen to get more into this baking. He's been talking about it for a little while, and I know he's borderline. He's almost scared of it, I think.
I am. And I tell you for why. When my daughter was quite young, we got her a baking book, and she started to take some interest, and she's got her own little barbecue, although she hasn't done it for a little while. So I really encouraged her to get into food, and she wanted to make some red velvet cakes. Well, they came out green, first and foremost. And we just had to throw the whole batch away. I don't know where I went wrong, but they were awful. And
what, to taste or just the colour?
Or both, yeah. I just honestly, so I don't know what I did wrong. And it's kind of, I'm scared is not the right word.
You've got to give it a go. And what is nice is when people do message me and say, oh, hey, Sue, I've cooked your whatever, or I've had to go at your apple cake, and they send a picture of it, it puts a big smile on my face. They've had a go. I've inspired them to make a cake on the barbecue.
Good. Yeah, and again, I think that's a really important message. And what we're trying to do on the whole podcast as a whole is just obviously inspire people to cook. But if there was one thing that you could say to our listeners, if their next cook was to go try something sweet and dessert-like, what would you say that they should go and try?
I'd say have a go at some chocolate brownies.
Yeah.
Because then the colour, they're already chocolate colour, so you're not going to worry about them being pale. They're already...
What a tip. It doesn't matter.
I did try and cook some scones on the barbecue.
I remember that. Was it like Marmite and cheese scones you talked about? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a Hairy Biker's recipe for Marmite and cheese scones. And I think a bit like what you were saying about, I think your first bread, it was black on the bottom and it didn't kind of rise. I mean, they tasted lovely.
Yeah.
But they looked like a burnt biscuit, actually.
You know, I've done fruit scones and cheese scones. Because you can.
Yeah, again, I think what my mistake was, I probably had a couple of too many beers before I got to it because I was too busy with my Scotch eggs and cooking those types of things. And then I didn't two zone it. I think I put them too close to the coals and they were stuck to the parchment, the baking paper.
Yeah.
So I ended up eating baking paper, which also wasn't very, very nice.
Have another go.
I should.
The thing is as well, with the Traeger, you won't have that same sort of level and problem with the direct heat, and you'll have a bit more control. If you're that worried, start off on there and move across, right?
I feel like it'd be cheating using the Traeger.
I don't think so.
Are you outside? Are you playing with heat and smoke? Then it's not cheating using the Traeger.
No, don't get me wrong. I do love having a Traeger. It's super convenient and I've been using it quite a lot recently. However, I think I'd like to try and master it on the charcoal. Do you know what I mean? That would give me a lot sense of more of a sense of achievement, I think.
It'll be more fun.
Yeah.
I promise you that.
Should we go on to barbecue bingo, actually? Should we look at setting you a challenge?
Go on then.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll share my screen. We'll, as ever, show our wheel of
shame.
So yeah, I'll share my screen. So basically, you should see now a wheel of various ingredients.
Yes, it's very colourful.
Yep, it does. On there's my signature dish. I think you said that's focaccia. Yeah.
Okay.
So if it lands on my signature dish, i.e. your signature dish, we'd get focaccia. Is that right?
Okay.
And also, the reason I like to call this our wheel of shame is it lets people know how our brain works, because Owen in particular will sit down and think of things that he thinks are a little bit different and a little bit interesting, and then will occasionally ask me for something wacky. But some of the items that we've got on there for people listening, we've got jalapeno peppers, we've got pork neck, leg of lamb, pineapple, turkey mince. Cauliflower always excites me because not only is it great to play with, but cauliflower cheese has to be one of the most underrated dishes of all time, in my opinion. And oxtail, but is there anything on there that looks a bit different or a bit intimidating to use?
I put my glasses on, I can read a bit better. I'm always up for a challenge, mind. Pork neck, that's not fillet, is it? What's pork neck?
Yeah, it's like the, I think in America they call it the money muscle, don't they? It's just off the shoulder at the top. It's almost like it is like a fillet essentially.
Okay, yeah. Nothing on there that would shock me. I don't think.
That's good. You're not allergic to any of those?
No.
We have made that mistake before.
I've put a sweet pastry
I
on
saw
there.
that.
Do you do much with pastry?
Not really, because barbecue cooking is reasonably healthy as long as you don't have too many of the rich sides that go with it. So I am trying to be good. So anything with pastry, I do try to avoid, apart from my sausage rolls. But
that soundbite, can I just keep that and play it to my wife over and over again?
Yes.
What, barbecue's healthy?
Yeah, just that bit over and over
all the
again.
fat drips off down into the coals.
I mean, Sue, do you just want to come here and talk to my wife for a bit?
Perhaps you should get her to do a bit of baking on the barbecue. She might like that.
Do you know, she's always said that she'd give it a go as long as I lit it, which I've got no problem with, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But as soon as I like the barbecue, I want to cook on it. That's all I want to do.
Teamwork.
Do you know, she does a great apple and cinnamon pie, so I need to get her to try and do that on.
Yeah, try to do it on the barbecue.
Mm.
Right. Yeah, I'll have a go at any of those.
Right, let's give it a spin.
Where are we going to land today?
Hey, cauliflower.
Yeah, I said I was excited about that. Where has your brain gone to? Have you thought anything straight off the bat?
The easiest one I've done before is like a baked cauliflower, where you sort of cover it in butter and herbs and actually wrap it in tin foil. But that, there's not much skill in that, is there really?
Hey, if it tastes good, that's the most important thing,
then
right?
You cut it like a cake. You open it up and it's like steamed in that tin foil. I've done that before. Cauliflower cheese, you said that, but I might have to think of something else.
Or do it multiple ways. Do like a cauliflower tapas from around your brain.
Or wrap it in bacon, wrap the florets in bacon or something.
Why not?
Sounds
Why
good to
not?
me. Everything tastes better with bacon, right?
Yeah. I'll have to put my thinking cap on.
Well, another thing that we celebrate on this podcast, and you've kind of touched upon it from the start, which we love you. I think you're the first guest to pretty much go straight there, is you learn best from barbecue when you make a mistake and fail. That's how you improve, trying things and making hiccups. If we got it perfect every time, we wouldn't learn anything from it. So you've talked about your burnt bread. Are there any other barbecue fails that can make people feel a bit more comfortable if they mess up, but also that you learned from and taught you something from it?
The other night, actually.
Yeah.
I used my rotisserie on my thuros for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew you didn't need very much charcoal. So I banked a bit of charcoal up at the back and set the chicken on the spit and got the motor going. And my son was home and my husband thought, and they said, what time's dinner, like you do? So I thought, I'll add a bit more charcoal on so it can cook quicker. And then, of course, I came inside and did some other bits and pieces, and I had my meter in it, and it was, steadily, the internal temperature was rising nicely. And then after an hour, it said, 5 minutes before the cook's done. And I went outside and it was on fire.
Whole chicken?
The end bit, which was the opposite end from my probe, actually. So I did post a picture, and I think in my stories, and I put, it's looking a bit caramelized, but I didn't post a picture of the of its bottom on fire, because
who doesn't want a chicken candle, right?
Yeah, burnt butt chicken or flaming butt chicken, I called it, I think. So yeah, I knew.
Did it taste good?
I knew it had. It wasn't too burnt, the skin, and the skin was okay, but the bird was actually really quite moist and juicy inside. So it wasn't a complete failure, and the skin was okay, but it just looked cremated, but it wasn't too bad. So, but that's my own fault. I wasn't outside watching it. I knew I put too much charcoal on because I tried to cook it quicker. So I need to do it again. And learn from that mistake.
Try and get it all on fire this time.
What about you, Owen? Have you had anything recently that you're hoping to kind of learn from?
I don't think so. Actually, I haven't done a huge amount of barbecuing recently, although I did a brisket on the Traeger, and it's not a fail as such, but it was disappointing. It was the first time I'd used the Traeger for a brisket. It tasted lovely. It was, it had the perfect bend, and it was really moist and pulled apart with a lid. No smoke ring, and that was it didn't create a bark like it would do when I've done it on, over wood and charcoal.
Okay.
I didn't get a bark. Around the outside, I showed a picture to Dan earlier today, and he thought it was pastrami at first. Right. It was really pink on the edge. But when you actually sliced into it, there was no smoke ring. It was So, and I see some of these people that use Traegers often and get some really, some good smoke rings. Yeah. I must have done something wrong.
But did it taste good?
It did taste good, and that's.
I think we're quite critical of our own cooks, aren't we?
Yeah.
And it looked beautiful. I mean, from a Ben point of view, I mean, being able to do that and the brisket just drops down either side, like and it looked juicy as anything. Yeah, it looked fantastic. And part of the reason I wanted to bring it up and see if Owen mentioned it is I think he was being far too harsh on himself.
I think we all are.
Yeah. And again, Owen and I are basically barbecue wives now. I think that's fair to say. Owen never listens to me. Something like being too harsh on yourself, because it looked amazing. But I think that's part of what we're here to talk about. People are so harsh on themselves when they cook. The amount of times that we cook something and we're not happy with it, but the people eating it not only destroy it, they wish there was more. I think that's
unless you're doing a competition cook, as long as everyone, you'll know when it's good, because whoever's eating it, if they got a smile on their face, that's when you know it's good, isn't it?
There's that, and I mean, I always talk about fails because I'm clumsy as anything, from being proud of how good my Yorkshire puddings are to the amount of times I've dropped the batter between the kitchen and getting it in. I never think to take the batter out and pour it into like the hot oil when I'm out there for some reason. I'm always like, quickly bring the oil in, pour it and bring it out. I think it's because I like keeping the batter cool in the fridge when it's resting to get kind of that shock. But I will say now, don't run around with hot oil in a pan.
No.
Luckily,
and always wear something on your feet in case you drop a hot coal on it or tread on a hot coal.
So I've not done it with boiling hot oil, but I have done it with coals where I've been in what they call flip-flops. Or for any Australia listeners, they call them thongs, don't they? So wearing those and cooking, and just a bit of ash coming up and landing on my foot, and me trying not to scream in front of people, getting stuff off my foot. It's a learning process, and fire and hot things are fun, but not walking around with them is what I'd say. Luckily, the one time I did that, I was outdoors and it went onto grass, and my wife didn't find out. But, because she would not have been pleased if she'd known I'd been walking in the house with that, frankly.
Oh.
I know, slap on the wrist, we all learn.
This is not directly barbecue related, but I have got, similar to you, Sue, where you're saying about a Caddy Fire bowl, I've got a fire pit that has a grill, although I wasn't using it for barbecue. And actually, Dan came over just after Christmas, and we got the fire pit out for the first time. And I wasn't far away from setting fire to my decking. I put a fireproof mat underneath the fire bowl. Yeah. And we'd gone inside for 10, 15 minutes, and I came back out and all of the fire mat had started melting. And obviously the heat was just going straight onto my decking, and it started, luckily the decking was wet where it had been raining, but you could see dry patches. Whereas I think if that had been dry with that intense heat, I'd have started scolding it. But yeah, not quite barbecue, but close enough.
But you've got to be, you've got to be safe, and you've got to be on it, really.
Yeah.
We're both just foolhardy, that's the problem.
But it's easily done, isn't it? As you say, you went inside for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's not thinking, that's my biggest problem. You get in such a process of doing something, particularly if you've cooked something indoors so many times, and you just start going through the motions and making sure you're checking off a mental checklist, as it were. And sometimes it's taking a step back and thinking, right, let's do this without potentially burning ourselves and the house down. But again, I haven't got a shack. Otherwise, I would have put money on that. I would have already burned that thing to the ground.
I did a Côte de Boeuf cook, because during lockdown, it was when my son was shielding at home, so I was at home with him, and that's when we started doing sort of some live cooks, and we did a Côte de Boeuf. So I cooked it indirect at first, and then of course I cranked up the heat and put it in my Kamado Joe, and when you raise the lid of your Kamado Joe on a hot cook, you need to burp the lid. Lift up. And I did sort of do that, and as I lifted it up, it was just the flames came up, and it was like, whoa! And we were laughing, but it wasn't funny really. It was like scary.
It's one of those things you can laugh at afterwards.
Yeah, I'm so scared of doing it on my Kamado because I've got a monolith and I have taken it up to hot temperatures, and I've also done, is it called shocking it, where every so often to clean it you take up to a really high temperature just to burn haven't off.
I haven't done that because I think it's a waste of charcoal, if I'm honest.
Hey, I'd like to learn more about it. The reason I did it was I talked about it on here. I cooked something. I can't remember what it was now. I think it wasn't the beef ribs. That doesn't matter. But the fat had dripped down, and as it had hit the deflector underneath, that had actually set on fire. And I'd managed to stop that very quickly, and it didn't affect the cook at all. But afterwards, I could see the fat had gone everywhere, and I thought, right, well, I'll burn it off, which is what I did, and it did help me get it very, very clean. But it does take quite a bit of charcoal to do.
My deflector plates are still quite clean because I tend to put a drip tray underneath.
It was the one time I hadn't done it.
I know.
I just hadn't done it. I know exactly what it was. It was a really thick cut rump steak. And I just, in my head, I was like, that's not going to cause enough for that to be an issue, really.
Yeah.
And it's always those types of things that I mess up when I haven't put precautions in place. I think in the future, I'm probably going to I'm tempted to wrap them in foil. I've heard that's meant to be not a bad idea to keep them, because it's easier to clean up if you wrap them in foil. I see people do that.
I haven't done that, but I will just stick a cheapy tin foil tray underneath, or I'll cover a pizza dish. The metal pizza baking trays that you might put a pizza on, that if you'd have bought from the supermarket, but we don't do that. We make our own. So I'll cover that with tin foil and use that, and then just replace the tin foil.
So is there anything that you wanted to kind of talk about that we haven't covered so far around baking, around barbecue, baking and barbecue, or anything else for that matter, actually?
I think we've covered most things. I can't remember what I talked about. Actually, I'm wearing my Angus and Oink t-shirts. So I am an ambassador for Angus and Oink. I have many of their rubs, but I met Scott and Melissa up in Scotland about 5 years ago, and we then did sell their rubs in the shop where I work, and I love to see them grow and produce more rubs and more sauces. And I met them again at Grill Stock. And obviously we did the barbecue schools last year, and then I went up to Aberdeen in June and did a baking school up there with them again, and they're a lovely couple and they work really hard, and so I'm delighted to be able to use many of their rubs in my cooking, which I use indoors as well as outdoors because they are so versatile.
We both also use Angus and Oink. I think we've both got a collection, and I'm sure you've got loads. So what would you say is your favourite Angus and Oink rub? You can only pick one.
Pick one. I was thinking that today because I'm thinking, what three am I going to take up to Scotland next week if I could take three? So choose one. One of their new ones, the Gosht Bengali curry powder, that makes an excellent biryani.
Tough.
Porky white chick. If I could have two, could I have two?
All right, go on then.
I think porky white chick on a chicken or pork. But an all-rounder, I'll have to go for three now, I suppose. Maybe the General or Mr. Rababa, that's four. I don't think I can pick a favourite.
What I find interesting there is none of them are the two that I would have gone to. I absolutely love Dirty Cow. I use that a lot.
Now, that was one of the original ones, and I do and still use that when I make burgers.
I'll use it in burgers. I'll use it on if I'm doing
bolognese
beef
type
ribs
thing,
and
chili.
stuff. Chili,
Yes.
yeah, I use it a lot in chili.
Yeah.
I find it very versatile.
That was one of their original 6. They had 6, I think.
What about feather duster? Feather duster is the other one that I use a lot on chickens. I love feather duster.
The Moom Army, the General.
I like Pegasus, you know, the bacon honey jalapeno.
Yeah.
That's quite nice. Yeah, Dirty Cow, again, I think is a good one.
And their most recent one is the satay one.
I haven't tried that yet.
Which is nut free, but tastes just like, you know, peanut sauce with no nuts. So if you've got any allergies, it's great.
I need to get my hands on the Iron Brew. I've said so many times on here, I love Iron Brew, and I keep meaning to order them. The only reason I haven't is because I still have quite a lot of the rubs from them already that I'm trying to work through. I just need to bite the bullet, I think. Have you had that, the Iron Brew? Have you used it to taste like Iron Brew?
I have it. I might have done it on some pulled pork, I think. I might have used it just on some pulled pork.
I just like, because again, with some of my family lives up in Scotland when I was younger, and some people are probably going to really think this sounds disgusting, but we used to do it. Almost the opposite of a float, but with Iron Brew. So instead of having a glass of Iron Brew and putting a scoop of vanilla ice cream in there, we'd have a bowl of 3 scoops of vanilla ice cream and then just pour Iron Brew over the top and have a go on it. But if it's got that sort of flavor, if it's got a sort of flavor profile, I'm wondering if it would also work on sweet stuff.
That's one way to find out.
We'll have to have you back, and you'll have to report in.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think we've kind of asked everything that we wanted to, and it was an absolute pleasure. Do you want to just tell everyone finally? Obviously, we want to now plug you and tell everyone how they can find you and follow you, and so tell our listeners where they can find you and see your cooks. Okay, I'm on Instagram at Sue_Stoneman. I'm on Facebook as Susan Stoneman, but they should be able to find me. I'm on Twitter at Sue_Stoneman, and I have a YouTube channel which my son set up for me in lockdown, and I'm nearly actually up to 200 subscribers. Woo-hoo! Well done. And so my idea after lockdown was to add some more content to it, but then I had to go back to work, and that's always the problem, isn't it? Yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and I really hope we get to see you at Sizzle Fest at the very least, if not somewhere else. Yeah. I'm looking forward to what you cook with cauliflower for your barbecue bingo challenge. I'll read some cookery books and get inspired. Great. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Sue. Well, thanks for having me. I'll speak to you soon. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Sue.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
That's it for another episode of the Meet and Greet Barbecue podcast. It was great to have Sue on, and I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into some baking, something that perhaps we just don't do enough. And I hope everyone is inspired to do some baking. As ever, we want to hear from you. Please get in contact with us through our social channels at Meet and Greet Barbecue Podcast, email meetandgreetbarbecuepodcast@gmail.com. We want to hear from you what you want to talk about on the podcast, what we're not covering, any questions that you have for us and our guests. Also, if you're a fan of the show and want to support us, if you go onto our website, Meet and Greet Barbecue Podcast, see the coffee widget in the left-hand corner, and you want to donate and support to us, we can then put more into creating this podcast and helping it grow. And again, to talk more about what you love. So if you can do that, that would be much, much appreciated. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Again, this allows us to bring more content to you across our channels. Also, if If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast app, please leave a review, give us a 5-star, leave your review. Again, that helps us get discovered, grow the podcast. And until next time, keep on grilling.
Today's episode of the Meet and Greet Barbecue podcast is brought to you by AOS Outdoor Kitchens. They are the South's leading outdoor kitchen design and installation specialists.